So let's take a look at this demonstration, creating a shared data source. In an earlier demonstration, we saw that we had an analysis services database with a cube and some data mining models. So in preparation for a later demonstration, I'm going to go ahead here in my report server project, right-click on the shared data sources folder and add a new data source. I then select the type to be Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services. And when I click Edit, I can build up the connection string to connect to my local instance and that sales analysis database. Test the connection, all is good. And then I name the database or the data source the same as the database. Okay, it doesn't support embedded spaces, so I put the two words together. The credentials page allows me to specify the credentials used to connect, and I'll leave this as Windows Authentication simply because Analysis Services supports nothing but Windows Authentication. And now I can right-click that individually and deploy it. So we see here in the output window that it has managed to deploy to the data sources folder the sales analysis. In fact, if we switch across to Report Manager, and then we now take a look in the data sources folder, we see we have the sales analysis data source. So note here that as a manager or a DBA or an administrator, I can come in here and rename. I can hide it. It's a visibility mechanism. I can also disable it. If I know that database is offline, by disabling the data source, I'm also disabling all report executions and subscriptions against that data source. I could manage the connection string, and let me copy that. The second part of the demonstration, I can modify the credentials that are used. So note here, if I use fixed credentials, that I could use a Windows account. And this way I could ensure that all users get to see the same data according to this one set of credentials. This is actually important configuration that we'll come back to when we talk about caching and snapshots later on, because it is a requirement that we use stored credentials to support those features. But not now. Where I'm taking this is, I actually have two instances of reporting services here. I have one in native mode, but I also want to show you what it looks like in the SharePoint integrated mode. You wouldn't typically do this in an environment. You wouldn't have both installed together, but for demonstration purposes, that's what I have. And so here I have my reports site and a data connections library. And I come across to the documents here and I say, let's go ahead and create a new report data source. And I'm going to create the identical data connection here in this instance. So you'll just see that it's the same object, just a different interface to create it. There we go. So it's tested it. It works, click OK. What we'll see then is that that definition, that data source, is a document that's now stored here in my data connections library. And we'll come back and we'll explore other capabilities of it in later demonstrations.